Today on CityCast Pittsburgh. About this time every year, my neighbor around the corner from me digs a big hole in his tiny front yard. He carefully slots these cute, colorful, interlocking bricks around the hole, and inside goes a banana tree. It makes no sense to me, but hey, maybe he knows something I don't. Today, we're talking to a gardening expert about how to grow whatever you love here in Pittsburgh.
It's Thursday, May 11th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about.
Claire Matway, you're the Community Garden Network Program Manager at Grow Pittsburgh. What do you think? Is my neighbor onto something? Would you try to grow a banana tree in Pittsburgh?
So very carefully, you can grow fruit trees that don't usually weather our Pittsburgh winters in this region. I actually don't really know about banana trees, but I do have some fig trees that I'm currently in the era of. They woke up too early in my basement, and now I'm shuffling them outside to give them some outdoor wind and light, and then back inside when it's cold at night. So yeah, you can play around with some stuff that is from other regions, but there's also plenty of stuff that really grows really well already here, and that stuff is exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to talk about what can successfully be brought to fruit here in our region. We've got a bunch of questions here that are sort of crowdsourced from among the CityCast family. First up, I guess, is where? How do you pick a good spot for your plants? How much space do you need? Give us the basics.
So you want an area to garden in that ideally it's in the ground. You can grow in containers. You can grow in raised beds that are closed off from the ground. Most ideally, it's kind of level. That can be hard to find in Pittsburgh. But also, hopefully, it gets 6 to 8 hours of sunlight each day. And you also want soil that's kind of well drained. You want to make sure your soil doesn't have any contaminants in it. And as you're choosing a place to put your garden, you want to make sure that there's not, a groundhog home right below, or a bunch of invasive knotweed creeping up on it.
I feel like you're already getting a little expert level. Let's start with the light part.
How important is that?
Yeah. If you have a super shady spot, it's unlikely that you're going to really be able to garden
you can say it. You can be blunt with us.
Produces in a way that really produces fruits and veggies for your kitchen. But yeah, basically, if you have a shadier spot, if you have a dappled spot, or you have a spot that's not quite reaching that 6 to 8 hours a day of sunlight, then root veggies and greens and herbs are most likely to do well in those shadier zones. So you could grow some red beets or some chives, or try some spinach and lettuce, something like that.
Neat. So how do you test your soil then? I know obviously a bunch of us have lead in our soil here in the city, all kinds of other problems. How do you go about even starting that? To be honest, I chickened out and did raised beds for myself. I didn't even want to try to get into that journey.
Yeah. So you can buy or borrow a soil corer, which is a tool that basically basically presses a sharp cylinder into the soil and pulls out a core sample from your soil. Hopefully you're taking several from a 10 by 10 foot square. You can also use a trowel or a shovel for soil sample collecting, but then you can send off your soil either to a soil testing lab like UMass or Penn State, or you can keep an eye out for the Allegheny County Conservation District and the Grow Pittsburgh Garden Resource Center communications about free soil lead screenings.
Yeah. I mean, so say you get your sample back from one of these facilities. True, mad props to anybody who goes to all of that effort.
Right, it's a lot of logistics.
There's a lot.
I have trouble returning a pair of shoes, that I ordered online.
I got library books in my car that were due 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Is there anything that you can do to improve it? Say, your soil doesn't have lead in it, but it also isn't nutrient dense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if you have high levels of lead or other contaminants, then you shouldn't grow in your soil, or there's certain mitigation efforts that you can embark on many years long sort of projects for. But if your soil is uncontaminated, there's no lead or arsenic or heavy metals, but it's like just kind of crappy, if it's just kind of rocky, or if there's
Yeah.
just not very much nutrient matter in there, you can aerate it. You can add compost to it. You can add mulch. You can do the kind of classic lasagna gardening method of adding cardboard or straw or some other brown matter, leaves, adding a layer of compost, adding a fresh layer of soil if you want. And if you just build up the soil over time, and also you can plant cover crops, especially legumes that are nitrogen fixing and really help build up the nutrient matter in the soil. So goal is to aerate it a bit, fluff it up, add nutrients, add organic matter, create an environment where you have healthy microorganisms and macroorganisms, potato bugs and fungi, and a happy home for those roots of those plants that you want to grow.
So what about timing then? When should you start planting for the year? Feel like a lot of people are usually Googling it nowadays, or within this week or so.
Totally. So if you want to go the simplest route, if you're just starting out and you want like the basic boundaries, I like to say the door opens on the season in the middle of May and closes on the season at the end of October. And so that just means that we're really unlikely to have a frost that kills young plants after May 15th, and we're starting to be more likely to have that type of frost after October 15th. With climate change, with all kinds of stuff, those edges are really blurry, but if you want to do it straight and simple, just plant after mid-May and expect, to be able to harvest up until sometime in October.
How do you decide what to plant? I feel like I always have to Google this to remind myself every year, but we're in hardiness zone 6, which gives people, I guess, a basic sense of what's possible where you live, like at a glance if you're at a garden center. But like when you talk to people about how they should start a garden, like what do you suggest? Like where do you want their heads to be, especially in like year 1, year 2, year 3?
Yeah, it all depends on some different stuff, right? It depends on what's going to be delicious, what you're really pumped about, and what your goal is. If there's particular things you're extra excited about having in your kitchen or growing to share with friends, then grow those things. If they're hardy in our zone, which they probably are.
Is there anything that grows really well here, or that you would recommend, like just to encourage people that were maybe afraid to get started on this, that are going to keep them in the game?
Many of your favorite veggies are probably able to be grown here. Tomatoes and hardy greens like kale and collards and mustards and lettuces and spinach, beans and peas, cucumbers and tomatoes and eggplants, okra. Some people are surprised that we can grow okra here, but you can get a ton of harvest out of a row of okra plants, and they'll grow to be like 10 feet tall sometimes if you've got a happy garden.
Really?
Yeah. I had a row of okra plants that I left in the yard after the season ended year before last, and the little like finches and sparrows loved to like cling to the top of the okra stalks in the winter, and I loved to look out at that. Yeah.
That feels like the right kind of vibe for Pittsburgh winter, just the birds looking down on your dead plants, judging you.
Yeah, I kind of love that.
So once your garden's all kind of plotted out and planted, then there's watering and weeds and pests. I know I've tried a bunch of different things in my raised beds for watering. We've used a sprinkler, a soaker hose. We had some of those upside down water bubble thingies.
Yeah.
Nothing really worked better for me than like just soaking it with a hose at dawn and dusk. What do you recommend for newbies?
I recommend that same thing. Get one of those wands for your hose that kind of extends it, and then before you water, unless it's been like super hot and dry lately and that the soil is going to be dry, before you water, check and make sure the soil's not moist a couple inches down, because you don't want to overwater. And then use the shower setting on your hose. Use that long wand and water right at the base of the plant, and just hold it there for a sec. So you don't want to water the leaves of the plant, just water thoroughly at the roots.
Okay. For folks with in-ground plants, how would you suggest dealing with weeds? Are you a weed block person? Do you like mulch? What's your game?
Yeah, I love mulch. I totally suggest that you have straw mulch, leaf mulch. You can get organic rolls of paper mulch, whatever. It's great for your soil. It's great for preventing diseases from splashing up on your plants from the soil when you water. It's great for preventing erosion when you water. It's great for preventing compaction, and it's great for suppressing weeds. So yeah, love mulch. And for weeding, yeah, if you have mulch, then hopefully you'll have minimal weeding. But I don't worry like a ton about weeds in my garden. They pop up, but if you're going to be really thorough about it, get to them early, pull them out at the root. If you're in a community garden and your bed getting weedy is going to impact somebody else's bed getting weedy, then it's very considerate to keep your weeds well tended to.
What about pests and diseases? I guess, how do you try to work on keeping your stuff healthy? I'm terrible at this. For example, my tomatoes last year, I planted 12 plants, not because I needed that many cherry tomatoes, but because I knew that the chipmunks were going to eat at least half of them.
Yeah, so pests and diseases is a whole learning curve, and like a pest or ID book or just the internet are definitely your friend in that way. The the biggest tips with that are to start your plants off healthy, so nurture your soil so they have a healthy place to grow. Then, yeah, you're going to get pests and diseases. You're going to get some kind of bug or some kind of weird fungus, and you just have to pay close attention to the plants and get to know what each different weird thing is. And it seems maybe at first that it will take forever, but if you practice, if you get to know the rhythms in the garden, you'll be like, oh yeah, this is this is a blight that's happening, and then this time it's a leaf miner beetle that's messing with my veggies.
So we also want to be good neighbors, of course, to our friends in the city that maybe have like a postage stamp to work with, or just a windowsill or a stoop. If, folks have to be like super, super careful or very limited in what they can grow, is there any one or two things that you would suggest for them?
Yeah, it depends on what the goal is. If you're trying to save money on groceries, then some of the stuff that you can grow that is much more cost efficient if you grow it are berries, herbs, lettuces, and spinach. Yeah, like strawberries, tomatoes, good tomatoes.
Yeah, good tomatoes. They
And
ruined me on grocery store tomatoes.
I know, yeah. And a small container can especially get you, yeah, stuff with shallower roots like spinach and lettuce, strawberries, radishes, something like that. Herbs can grow in some pretty small containers too, and that's something that you can save a lot of money on and like really spice up your kitchen situation with. If it was me and this has been me before. It's only recently that I have a yard of my own to work with, but if it was me growing in just a couple of containers, I would grow some compact growing tomatoes because you can get varieties of tomatoes that are especially suited to containers that aren't going to get super big, which is also excellent.
Well, let's end on a personal note. Now that you have a new and larger yard, what are you most excited about growing this season?
Ah, that's such a hard question. I have a whole garden plan map in the other room. I could show you.
Do you have charts and graph and an easel?
I do have I have like graph paper and everything drawn out, and I'll be growing 6 different tomatoes and probably 6 different types of greens. I think tomatoes and greens are my favorite veggies to have in the garden. Oh, and my blackberries are kind of mature now, so they should be producing. But I've also gotten super into flowers lately. I love to have flowers to cut for a bouquet for the dining room table or to bring over to a friend. Yeah, those are kind of basics, but they're things I'm excited about every year. Every year it's still kind of magic to grow stuff.
Absolutely. Claire Matway is the Community Garden Network Program Manager at Grow Pittsburgh. Claire, thank you so much for all these pointers, and happy growing season.
Yeah, you too.
Lead producer Mallory Falk here with a little more news before you go. Do you have ideas for Pittsburgh's next budget? thoughts about what our local government should be putting its money toward? Well, city officials are holding community meetings to get input on the 2024 budget. The first one takes place over Zoom this Saturday, and there are in-person meetings in Homewood, Carrick, Manchester, and Sheridan through June. If talking in front of other people isn't really your thing, there's also a virtual survey you can fill out online. Mayor Gainey will put together a preliminary budget by the end of September, so now's your time to weigh in. We'll drop a link in our show notes with more information. And City Council is holding a public hearing for residents to learn more about Larry Scirotto, the nominee for Pittsburgh's next police chief. You can ask about his experience and plans for the Bureau before he gets confirmed. Council members will also hold a separate interview with him. According to the Trib, Council hasn't set dates yet for the hearing or interview, but stay tuned. We'll let you know once they're scheduled. That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hate Pittsburgh newsletter. And if this episode has you ready to start your own garden, check out our show notes. We've got information about Grow Pittsburgh's great resources, including their lending library with free gardening tools. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you then.
I am heartened to learn that the answer to so much of this is Google it. That makes me feel so much better.